The sun had barely risen over the sprawling deserts of Arizona, casting long golden rays across the rugged terrain, when Cole Tanner, the seasoned rancher, walked along the fence lines of his property, his boots crunching against the dry earth. Dust rose in tiny whirlwinds around him, the wind carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and distant smoke from a morning fire. Life on the ranch was never easy, but Cole had learned the rhythm of this harsh land from his father and his father before him. Yet, despite the familiarity of the desert and the steady heartbeat of his livestock, something in the air felt heavier than usual that morning. News had been spreading through the county, rumors twisting like dry tumbleweeds, that the local authorities were pressuring the Apaches living nearby to sell their ancestral land, threatening them with fines and legal entanglements that few could understand or fight. Cole's neighbor, a quiet, dignified Apache woman named Lita, had lived on her land for decades, her family's legacy stretching back generations. Cole had known her since childhood. He had watched her grow into a resilient woman whose spirit could not be broken by lawmen, land developers, or the merciless desert winds. When he saw her standing on the ridge overlooking her property, the early sun glinting on her dark hair, her jaw set with quiet defiance, he felt an almost primal urge to protect her. For Cole, it was not just neighborly concern, it was justice, and his heart refused to stand idle while corruption and greed threatened someone so deserving of respect. The county officials were the first to arrive, their black SUVs rattling across the gravel roads, their badges gleaming under the morning sun, carrying papers that demanded Lita vacate or face legal consequences. Cole met them at the gate, his broad shoulders squared, the lines of age and experience etched into his face. "She's done nothing wrong," he said, his voice low but firm, carrying across the quiet expanse of desert between them. The officials exchanged glances, surprised by his audacity. "This is a legal matter, Mr. Tanner," one of them replied, shoving the papers forward. "We have the authority to enforce the law." Cole's hand hovered near his holster, not for violence, but as a reminder that he was not a man to be trifled with. "The law isn't justice," he said, his eyes scanning the dry horizon as if seeking confirmation from the land itself. "And I stand for justice." Lita emerged from behind him, her gaze steady, and for a moment the desert seemed to hold its breath. Together they were an unspoken alliance, a rancher who had spent his life defending what was right, and a woman whose heritage was being threatened, whose family's blood and sweat had soaked into the earth she stood on. The officials hesitated, unsure how to proceed against a man whose reputation was as wide as the canyons and whose sense of integrity was known by nearly everyone in the county. That hesitation was all the opening Cole needed. Over the next few days, he worked tirelessly gathering evidence, speaking to neighbors, and uncovering the threads of corruption that had led to the attempt to seize Lita's land. He documented illegal filings, questionable payments, and the intimidation tactics of the developers who sought to buy the land cheaply. Each night he returned home, exhausted but driven, fueled by a sense of duty that would not allow him to rest while injustice thrived. He spoke with Lita late into the evenings, their conversations a mix of strategy and stories of the land, of generations past, of survival, and of the quiet beauty that the desert held when one truly looked for it. Slowly, a plan began to form. Cole knew he would have to confront the authorities publicly, take the fight to court, and risk not just his reputation, but potentially his livelihood. Yet the thought of failing Lita, of standing by while her family's history was erased, was unbearable. When the day of the first confrontation arrived, the air was tense and electric. Cole and Lita stood side by side outside the county office, the wind tugging at their clothes, the sun casting long shadows behind them. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by whispers of the rancher who would not back down, and the Apache woman who would not be intimidated. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled, and murmurs spread like wildfire. Cole stepped forward, his voice clear and unwavering as he addressed the officials, the crowd, and the cameras. "I will stand for her. I will stand for justice, and I will not allow greed to erase what is rightfully hers." His words hung in the desert air, as enduring and unyielding as the red rocks that surrounded them. And in that moment, something shifted. The officials faltered, the crowd leaned in, and Lita allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Cole Tanner, the rancher who had faced every hardship this land could throw at him, was not just defending a neighbor, he was defending the very soul of justice itself. The first chapter of this struggle had begun, but both knew the road ahead would be long, filled with challenges that tested courage, loyalty, and the bonds between those willing to fight for what was right. Yet in Cole's heart, there was no doubt. He would not falter, he would not yield, and he would stand unflinchingly for his friend, for her heritage, and for justice that must not be silenced. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation. As Cole Tanner stepped inside, Lita at his side, the gallery was crowded with neighbors, reporters and curious onlookers, all drawn by the story of the rancher who refused to back down. Across the room, the officials and the developers looked confident, certain that their legal maneuvers and intimidation would prevail. But Cole had prepared meticulously, uncovering every document, witness testimony, and piece of evidence that proved the attempts to seize Lita's land were illegal. He presented the facts with a calm authority that left the opposition scrambling, his words carrying the weight of truth and integrity. Lita watched him, pride and hope shining in her eyes, realizing that this fight was bigger than the law. It was about standing for what was right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As the hours passed, tension mounted. Lawyers argued, objections were raised, but Cole remained unshaken, guiding Lita through the process and speaking directly to the heart of the matter. Finally, the judge leaned forward, reviewing the evidence, and with a firm voice, declared that the attempts to seize Lita's land were unlawful. Justice had prevailed, and a wave of relief and joy swept through the courtroom. Outside, the desert sun was setting, painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson. Cole and Lita walked out together, greeted by cheers from neighbors who had come to witness the triumph. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in the fires of struggle, trust, and courage. Cole knew the fight had not only protected a friend and her family's heritage, but had sent a message to the community. Injustice would not stand when people were willing to rise for what was right. As they stood side by side, the wind carrying the scent of sagebrush and freedom, Cole smiled. "We did it," Lita said softly, her voice filled with gratitude and quiet triumph. Cole nodded, eyes scanning the vast desert that had shaped them both. "We did, and I'll always stand for you, always." The story of their courage spread, inspiring others to fight for justice, to defend the vulnerable, and to never underestimate the power of one person's resolve.